The Charter Lecture is historically associated with the AGM, and it's often delivered by a member of the RSB Council, and this year is no exception to that. Dr. Suzy Moody is an early career academic and an RSB Trustee. She graduated with BSc Honours Microbiology from Cardiff University, followed by a postgraduate diploma in clinical nursing at Bournemouth University. She completed her MSc in infectious disease from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine while working as an ICU nurse, before working overseas for 2 years in a variety of healthcare settings in Africa and Asia. On returning to the UK, she completed her PhD studying Streptomyces bacteria at Swansea University. After 2 postdoctoral placements studying transcriptomics, metabolomics and proteomics in a variety of fungal and bacterial systems, she's now a lecturer at Kingston University, establishing her research group studying bioremediation of plastics. Suzy is currently a trustee of the Society of Applied Microbiology and an active member of their policy subcommittee. And I'd like to invite Suzy.
Thank you for the invite today. So I'm sure that if you looked me up to see who was giving the Charter Lecture this year, you'd be wondering why me, when it's usually somebody more senior, somebody with more experience, lots of writes and papers, industry leaders, or those who've made a significant contribution to government. And I have to tell you that I wondered the same thing. To be honest, I'm not a professor, I'm not a head of research, I'm not the head of anything else either. I am, as Ian said, only an early career academic. I've been in post just for a few years, but I am a council member. I'm also different to every other academic I know in a variety of ways, and today I'm going to take you on a little journey through why I think being different from those around you can be a good thing, why I think being a zebra among horses is an exciting place to be. Now, given the honour of presenting the Charter Lecture, I obviously wanted to bring a sense of gravitas to the occasion, so I'm going to start by talking about my research. I'm going to start by talking about pants. Now, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you whether you're wearing pants at the moment, because that might make the person next to you feel a little bit uncomfortable, depending on how you answer. But perhaps you would humour me and put your hand up if you usually wear pants. Excellent. So the vast majority of us wear pants. And if we extrapolate that and think that most people who wear pants wear them 7 days a week, so we have a 7-day supply, multiply that by the number of people in the UK, and we come up with about 469 million pairs of pants currently in use in the UK. I don't know how much you know about your pants. They're probably made of cotton, and the trim is nylon and elastane. That means they fit, they can be a bit stretchy, and they're comfortable. Now, we're going to assume, bear with me, that your pants will last for 2 years. This is completely unscientific and arbitrary, based on the fact that I know how long you can make a pair of pants last, and also how quickly small boys can destroy them. I have 3 small boys and significant experience of pant destruction. So we're going to assume 2 years. After 2 years, those 469 million pairs of pants are going to be wholly, the elastic will be going, and they won't be ones that you want to wear anymore. So how much waste do we then generate? Thinking about it in terms of weight, I can tell you small boys' pants weigh about 20 grams, ladies' pants about 25, men's pants are whopping 60. Clearly, I recommend that you get your whole family involved in your research. It's a good bonding experience and a very good learning opportunity for small boys. So the average pair of pants weighs around 35 grams. That means that by 2024, when those 469 million pairs of pants in circulation today are wholly and useless, they will generate 16 million kilos of textile waste. And who puts their pants into a recycling scheme? Nobody. Pants are personal, and rightly so. But if we're honest, we also wear them to destruction, and then we're really embarrassed to put them in a recycling scheme. So you put them in the bin, into landfill, and that's where my research comes in. So I use pants as a kind of abbreviation for mixed fabric textiles. Pants, as I said, cotton, which is natural derived, but also petroleum derived synthetics, nylon, polyester, elastane, okay? And that means that the textile waste we produce is actually a huge and growing pollution problem. We have an obsession with fast fashion. Westerners buy 60% more clothes now than they did 15 years ago. Right, this isn't an issue that's going to go away. It's a polluting industry, from the fossil fuels that are used in manufacture of the synthetic fabrics, right through to microplastic deposition in soil and water as a result of sending them to landfill. Textile industry isn't something that we can ignore. Here in the UK, like most of Europe and the USA, we export our waste into lower income countries. And the figures of what we're doing are beginning to make the press. So just in the last few months, it was reported that Chile gets about 60,000 tonnes of clothes imported each year. More than half of it ends up in landfill. Ghana gets 15 million items of clothing every week imported. And because most of it is poor quality, again, 40% of that ends up in landfill, which then gets washed into the sea. Those are clothes that are coming from recycling centres here in the West. The fact is, wherever you go across the globe, textile waste, end-of-use garments, aren't being recycled. And that's where my big passion is the idea of developing sustainable bioremediation for textile waste, using fungi to compost textiles. Now, as a fungal biologist, you get used to sticking out in the Department of Biology. Sticking out in the microbiology department, most people don't work on fungi, particularly filamentous ones, we're weird already. But then add in the fact that you're growing them on pants, and you really do stick out on a limb. So the first thing that I think is a zebra feature of me is that I'm interdisciplinary. I sit between microbiology, environmental science, textiles research, bioremediation, analytical chemistry. And that can make building a community around you very difficult. It's hard to find other academics to bounce ideas around with when you work on something so totally different. But it can also bring benefits. It can bring benefits being in the RSB because the experience and expertise that is already within our membership is so broad that sitting outside those kind of traditional subject boundaries doesn't really matter. I kind of fit in anyway. And when I'm on council, it helps me bring insight into the discussions that we have around some of the difficulties that other interdisciplinary researchers can face. So being a zebra in my research, being outside that normal microbiology research community can make you stick out, but it can also make you very memorable. Let's face it, who's going to forget the crazy pants lady? So does it work, I hear you ask? The short answer is, we don't know. It's very hard to get blue sky funding for research that we don't know whether it works, and we need a really long timescale to actually say whether you can completely compost textiles. But the excellent Rachel Harper, who you can see up there, a research student who's working on this, has made some real progress. And credit to her, she's come with me on this journey kind of outside traditional microbiology. So when we think about microbiology, when we teach microbiology, we think about aseptic technique. We think about agar plates and flaming things. That's not great when you work on textiles because textiles aren't sterile. Textile waste is never going to be sterile. So we had to completely rethink what we were doing in the lab. And we've come up with a really good system which is not sterile. And in a lab where most people consider 48 hours a really long incubation time, we have incubation times of months. So we're really kind of moving outside that traditional remit of microbiology, if you like, but it does work. What you are looking at here, got a pointer, here we go. So this one here, that's some black fabric, and one of our tyrofungi is growing out across the surface. So this is really early days. And what you can see on this side here is that same image, but in close-up under a light microscope. So you can see the white hyphal fungal growth across the surface of the fabric. Give it a couple of months, and what you've got here is the same material, but now you've got fungal hyphae grow completely through the fabric, completely invades it. Fungi are great at wiggling into gaps, and that's what they've done. And you can see these bits here, you can see some of the strands of the material are still black, but quite a lot of them now are this kind of pinky red colour, and that's because the fungus has completely bioremediated the dye out of the fabric, which we think is the first time that that's ever been demonstrated, which is already a win, because it means that dye then doesn't get washed into the environment. We've also got some very nice evidence that the amount of synthetic component within the fabric has an impact as well. So we started from a baseline of nothing. We didn't know which fungi would work, we didn't know what the impact of a synthetic would be, or whether it mattered which synthetic it was. We didn't know what impact the dye would have, we don't know whether it will completely mineralise. We have so many questions because there just isn't a research field around this. And what you can see at the end there, this one here, is a load of white hyphae growing on natural derived textiles. Okay, so the thick bit going across the middle there, that is one of the fabric, part of the fabric. What you've got down at the bottom here is the same fungus growing on something that contains 4% elastane. So the moment you introduce something that's synthetic, you've got a completely different metabolite profile. The fungus responds to it in a huge way, and we're still analysing that to try and understand which pathways and processes the fungus uses during that bioremediation process. So I do something totally different to every other microbiologist, but it is really exciting to do that and sit outside what's considered sort of normal research. And we also have the benefit that pretty much whatever we find out, we're going to find out something nobody else knew before, which is always nice in science. You do it because it's really cool, right? We do something cool, exciting and fun to find out stuff. That's what we do. Now, COVID hit right at the start of my independent research career, and as Ian said in the introduction, I was a nurse before I did my PhD, so when Boris said in March 2020, quick, all ex-nurses come back to the NHS, I went back and I worked part-time on the COVID wards. Long story short, I ended up going back part-time permanently. So I now am a career zebra. I am part-time lecturer at Kingston University, where I stick out because I'm also a nurse, and I'm also part-time nurse at Southampton Hospital, where I stick out because I'm also a microbiologist. So I stick out wherever I am, but those are both fantastic places to work, shameless advert for both. But it also has a really big impact on my teaching, which I didn't expect. Now, when I come in, I'm teaching, I could be teaching biologists, biochemists, biomedical scientists, pharmacology. I teach across a few courses, and I teach both undergraduates and postgrads. And what a lot of them are really interested in is the medical side of biology. So when I come in and introduce myself as both lecturer and as a current nurse in the NHS, I have their attention instantly, which for those of you in teaching is a real bonus. You're on to a winner if you've got their attention from the start. And they love it. Whether it's, whether you call it authenticity, lived experience, you can put any name on it. But having that current experience and bringing that into my teaching has given me new confidence in what I'm doing. So little things like describing the pathology of multi-organ failure, well, I do that every day in my other job. This is something where I read the signs and symptoms on real people, real patients, and that currency of that knowledge is something that comes into the classroom with me, and the students really respond really well to it. The other thing that I discovered this year, which I hadn't really anticipated, maybe a bit naively, was that they really want to tap into you for employability advice. So Kingston is a lovely place to work. I have a lot of wonderful colleagues there, and that people don't generally leave, which means that they have no experience of the current job market. I do. I've been through an NHS recruitment process in the last year, which means that the students then like, can we have advice? So I ended up doing sessions with them looking at how to do the application form, how to do an interview, what to expect. So it's been a really nice bonus that I can use that kind of zebra nature of bringing the diversity of my experience and make it teaching more exciting for them, but also being able to give them that employability advice as well. It's not really something that you can capture well in an academic CV, but at least the students appreciate it. The other thing is that on council, we don't typically have many clinical practitioners. It's relevant to some of our member organisations, it's relevant to some of our government and policy engagement work, particularly over our response to the pandemic, and it's relevant to some of our public engagement work as well. So bringing that expertise into council has been really good. I won't pretend it's not without its challenges. Being both a nurse and a lecturer is pretty tricky, but I wouldn't be as good at either if I didn't have both as part of me. I mean, you can't imagine a zebra with only the black stripes, right? And that experience that I bring into council is going to be richer and deeper as a result of having, shall we say, a slightly striking persona. Now, as I said at the start, I'm at the beginning of my research career. I only did my PhD as a mature student, so I've only been a lecturer for 4 years. How on earth did I end up on something as prestigious as the RSB Council? Well, it started with an event hosted by the Society for Applied Microbiology, SFAM, and I met Mark Fielder, the smiley chap in the glasses at the top there. He was then the president, and he was doing what Mark does best, which is going around talking to everybody and making sure they felt welcome. Having talked to him for a few minutes about who I was and what my background was, he was like, "We really need you on our policy committee, why don't you apply?" And I was like, "Because I've only just finished my postdoc and I've got nothing to say that's of any use." He disagreed, and SFAM generally has a very good diversity, career diversity on their committees. So I applied and was accepted onto the policy committee, which is great. And I have to say, I absolutely love it. It means that what you're doing as a scientist counts for more than just ref, and it's a really good way of making that science benefit the public as well. And now I can comment both as a microbiologist and as a nurse, so I've got the environmental and the clinical, which is another bonus. From there, I applied and went on to be a trustee. I sit on the exec committee, and then last year, Brendan Gilmore, our lovely current president that you can see there, asked me to go forward for General Secretary, so I'm also General Secretary of SFAM. I do sometimes feel that I'm living the dream and that it might all end rather quickly when I wake up. It's really tempting to think that it would be a more established microbiologist that would make a better job of being in those positions than me, but actually the career profile doesn't matter. It's other qualities that you bring to that are important. So things like honesty and integrity, the willingness to attend a lot of meetings, and the ability to ask an awful lot of questions. I think that all of the committees I sit on have probably got used to the fact that I'm not shy about asking a whole load of questions to make sure I know what's going on. And that's good, because it ensures that you've got robust decision making, that you've got good financial stability. And in some ways, when I think about it, it's about advocacy for our members in the same way that I advocate for my patients when I'm in clinical practice. So there's plenty of crossover. Now, why am I telling you this? It's not just to blow my own trumpet. It's because I want to show you that council is not the exclusive reserve of professors and leaders, of which there are a lot on council, and they're very, very impressive, and that can be a little bit daunting if you're like me. But the RSB values diversity in that voice as well. I can bring the skills that I've developed in my work for the work for SFAM into my work for the RSB, and I bring different experience into council. I bring the experience of being an early career academic. in somewhat strange and challenging times, it has to be said. I bring the experience of clinical practice. I bring the experience of currently teaching on an accredited course, so I'm on the receiving end of what we do in accreditation. And if I admit that I might have been rather nervous before my first council meeting, and I've only ever been to ones that are online, wondering how I'd fit in and how I'd be received, I have to say I've had nothing but welcome, and made to feel that my voice, my experience is valuable and useful to the RSB. And I think Julia and Mark have a lot to play into that role, so thank you to you for that. Now, strange slide, but as a result of being out on, let's say, a little bit of a limb with microbiologist and nursing, doing something completely different to everyone around you does make you stick out. But it does mean that I have quite a different collection of skills from those around me as well. So most nurses don't do research, that's not what they're in it for. Most research nurses don't do microbiology, and most researchers aren't in clinical practice, whereas I'm on 3. So those opportunities are beginning to open up, and when you stick out, then people notice you. And opportunities are beginning to open up at the intersection of microbiology and nursing, and infection control, nurse education, antimicrobial stewardship, and how we move on from a period of very intense PPE use. So very exciting times. Watch this space for some really cool research coming up. I wanted to finish by talking about our mission as the RSB. Our mission is to be a unifying voice for biology, and that means your voice is important within the RSB. Whether you're an undergraduate or a postgraduate, early career, teacher, industry, academia, technician, research, government, have I missed anybody? Or whether you're a zebra, whether you're another interdisciplinary researcher who feels like biology is only part of what you do, your voice is part of our voice as the RSB. I'm an early career academic. I'm at a post-92 university. I am a nurse who researches plants and mushrooms. There are lots of reasons why I could choose not to engage. But being different is what makes me valuable. And your voice, your experience are needed too, whichever background you're coming from. I still think of myself as a bit of a zebra among the rather thoroughbred horses of council. So if you're sitting there thinking that you couldn't fit in, or that it's too early to contribute something meaningful, think again. Get involved in your local branch. You might be there for 50 years, but I don't think that's compulsory. It's really worth getting involved. People are so friendly, so welcoming, both other committee members and also the staff. For me, the benefits include being involved in government engagement with science, contributing to policy and briefings, and then being able to take that back into the lecture theatre and inspire my students with what I do with my research, getting them to think about what they could do. Where's their degree going to take them, opening their eyes to the world of science policy and more. It's given me a wider and broader view of biology and the opportunities and challenges that impact on others, greater understanding of the context of biology education, and I can and do seek advice from more experienced members. Thank you, Jackie, for actually getting me up on the podium. We can only be authentic and have authority to speak as that unifying voice of biology when we have diverse representation. So I urge you that if you're not already involved and you'd like to be part of something that's bigger than just the day job, then get involved, because it's really worthwhile. I'd like to give a couple of thank yous, because the people I live with, my mum, dad and husband and children, put up with some very odd hours and considerable obsession about mushrooms, so they deserve a thank you. I'd also like to thank Bamboo Clothing. They're a really small company that have a very strong sustainability ethos, and they funded Rachel's work, and I think that really takes a lot of guts from a small company. Owen's my line manager, and the rest of the Kingston University staff for giving me that zebra opportunity, for embracing the quirkiness and seeing the value in it, and the nurses from critical care at UHS, because they just accept that I am very odd compared with them and they don't make me feel too weird for it. And thank you to you for listening.